My parents refused to attend my wedding. Dad said, "We can't come and sit with those low lives you call in-laws." So I immediately stopped funding their lifestyle. Now let's see who the real low lives are. A few weeks later, they needed me, so I gave them my conditions, and they just couldn't believe. Hello. Thank you for your continuous support. This means a lot to us. If you enjoy the stories we share, kindly subscribe to this channel. It will be great if you can leave a comment on which city you are watching from. We might just give you a shout out in our next story. Today's special shout out goes to Linda from Rockwell, Texas. We are glad you enjoy our stories. Now let's dive into the details of today's story. I'd always known my parents cared more about what people thought than what I felt. But that day, they proved it in a way I couldn't ignore. I stood in their living room. My living room, really, since I'd been paying the rent for years, holding the little velvet box with Lila's ring still warm in my pocket. I proposed to her the night before, down on one knee by the old oak tree in her dad's backyard, and she'd said yes with tears in her eyes. I couldn't wait to tell Mom and Dad, figuring they'd at least fake some happiness for me. I was wrong. Engaged. Mom's voice hit a pitch I hadn't heard since I dented their car at 16. She sat on the couch, her manicured nails digging into the armrest like she was bracing for a crash. "To who?" "Lila," I said, grinning despite the tension creeping up my spine. "You've met her. The girl from the factory worker's family." "She's that girl." Dad cut me off, his face twisting like I just confessed to a crime. He stood by the window, arms crossed, his graying hair slicked back the way he liked it for church. "The one with the father who smells like motor oil?" "You're joking, Elliot." "No joke." My grin faded fast. "She's the one. We're getting married in 3 months." The room went quiet, but it wasn't the good kind of quiet. It was the kind where you hear the clock ticking louder because no one's breathing. Mom shot Dad a look, and I knew what was coming. They'd been dropping hints for years. "Marry up, Elliot. Find a girl with a trust fund. We deserve better than this life." Better than what? I'd been footing their bill since I was 22, fresh out of trade school with a welding gig that paid decent. Rent, utilities, even the monthly allowance so Mom could keep up her book club brunches and Dad could play golf with his buddies. I'd given them everything, and now they were looking at me like I'd spat in their faces. "Elliot," Mom started, her tone softening like she was talking to a kid who didn't get it. "We've sacrificed so much for you. Raised you to be smart, to make something of yourself. And you pick her? A girl from nothing." "She's not nothing," I snapped. "She's honest. She works hard. She makes me happy, happier than I've been in years." Dad laughed, a short, bitter bark. "Happy? You think happiness pays the bills? You could have had a girl from the Hill District, old money, connections. Someone who'd lift us all up. Instead, you're dragging us down with trash." "Trash." My hands balled into fists. "Lila's family welcomed me when you two barely noticed I was around unless I was writing a check. And dragging you down. I've been carrying you for years. Don't you dare," Mom hissed, standing now, her eyes flashing. "We gave you everything. Roof over your head, food on the table. You owe us." "Owe you?" I stepped closer, voice low but shaking. "I've paid that debt 10 times over. $800 for rent every month. $200 for your allowance. Groceries, car repairs. I even covered that stupid golf club membership, Dad. What more do you want? We want you to think," Dad shouted, slamming his hand on the windowsill. "You marry that girl, you're throwing away everything we've built. You think we can sit at a wedding with those lowlives you call in-laws? I'd rather die." That hit me like a punch. I'd pictured them there, Mom in one of her fancy dresses, Dad grumbling, but clapping me on the back after the vows. But they weren't just rejecting Lila, they were rejecting me. All I'd done for them didn't matter. I wasn't their son, I was their meal ticket, and I'd just picked the wrong menu. "Then don't come," I said, the words tasting like acid. "I don't need you there." Mom gasped, clutching her chest like I'd stabbed her. "Elliot, you don't mean that." "I do." I turned for the door, my heart hammering. "Lila's my family now. You can figure out how to live without me." "Elliot," Dad's voice boomed, but I didn't stop. I was out the door, down the steps, and in my truck before they could say another word. My hands shook on the wheel as I drove back to my place, the little apartment I'd been fixing up for me and Lila. I kept replaying Dad's words, low lives, and Mom's fake tears. They thought I'd cave, like always. They thought I'd pick them over her. But I was done. I pulled into my driveway, cut the engine, and sat there, staring at the ring box I'd pulled out of my pocket. Lila deserved better than their snobbery, and so did I. 3 months to the wedding, and they'd made their choice. Now I had to make mine. I didn't sleep much that night, but by morning, I knew what I had to do. They'd crossed a line, and I wasn't going back. Not yet, anyway. I just didn't know how far they'd push me, or how far I'd push back. The morning of my wedding, I woke up with a knot in my stomach, but it wasn't about marrying Lila. That part felt right, solid, like the welds I'd spent years perfecting at the shop. No, the knot was about Mom and Dad. I'd spent 3 months hoping they'd call, show up, or at least send a text saying they'd changed their minds. Nothing. Just silence since that blowout in their living room. I told them they didn't have to come, but deep down, I hadn't believed they'd actually skip it. They did. I stood in front of the mirror in my rented tux, adjusting the tie Lila's dad, Frank, had lent me. It was a little faded, but it meant something. He'd worn it at his own wedding 30 years ago. Frank clapped me on the shoulder when I got to the venue, a small community hall Lila's mom had decked out with flowers from their garden. "Your family now, Elliot," he said, his voice rough but warm. I nodded, swallowing hard. My own parents couldn't be bothered, but this guy I'd known for a year was ready to call me son. The ceremony was simple. Lila walked down the aisle in a dress she'd sewn herself, her dark hair pinned up with a clip her sister made. She looked at me like I was the only guy in the room, and for a minute, I forgot about the empty chairs where Mom and Dad should have been. We said our vows, her hand steady in mine, and when I kissed her, the room cheered, Frank loudest of all. It wasn't fancy, but it was ours. At the reception, though, the hole they'd left started to ache. Lila's cousins were dancing, her mom was passing out homemade cake, and I was trying to keep a smile on. Then I overheard one of Frank's buddies at the bar. "Where's the groom's folks?" he asked, loud enough to carry. "Work or something?" Frank shrugged, glancing my way, and I felt my face heat up. I stepped outside for air, the noise fading behind me. That's when it hit me. They weren't just rejecting Lila anymore. They were rejecting everything I'd built, everything I was. I pulled out my phone, staring at the last text I'd sent them 3 months back. "You made your choice. Now live with it." No reply then. No reply now. I'd been bankrolling their lives, $800 for rent, $200 extra every month, even the gas for Dad's golf trips. And they couldn't even show up for an hour to see me happy. My thumb hovered over the screen, anger bubbling up like molten steel. I'd warned them, but they didn't think I'd follow through. Time to prove them wrong. Back inside, Lila found me by the punch table, her eyes searching mine. "You okay?" she asked, soft but steady. I didn't want to ruin her day, but she deserved the truth. "They didn't come," I said, keeping my voice low. "Not a call, not a word. I'm done, Lila. I'm cutting them off." She didn't flinch, just took my hand and squeezed it. "You sure?" "Yeah. They don't get to treat you like dirt and still cash my checks. Rent's due next week. They'll figure it out without me." She nodded, a small smile tugging at her lips. "Then we'll figure it out together." That was Lila, quiet, but tougher than she looked. We danced after that, her head on my shoulder, and for a while, I let the music drown out the mess with my parents. But when we got home that night, our little apartment with the mismatched furniture and the leaky sink, I couldn't shake it. I sat on the couch, still in my tux pants, and pulled out my phone again. No more warnings, no more games. I typed a new message. "Wedding's over. You weren't here. Neither's my money. Good luck." I hit send, and it felt like dropping a weight I'd been carrying too long. Lila came out of the bedroom, barefoot in her pajamas, and sat next to me. "Done?" she asked. "Done," I said, leaning back. "They're on their own now." She rested her head against me, and we stayed like that, the quiet settling in. I thought that was it, clean break, new start. But I should have known better. Mom and Dad weren't the type to go down without a fight. They built their whole world on my dime, and I just pulled the plug. I didn't hear from them that night, or the next. Rent day came and went, and still nothing. I figured they were too proud to beg. Then, a week later, my phone lit up. Mom's name on the screen. I didn't answer, let it go to voicemail. When I played it back, her voice was shaky, all tears and guilt trips. "Elliot, how could you do this to us? After everything we've given you? Call me back, Please. I deleted it, but my gut twisted. Lila watched me from the kitchen, not saying a word, just waiting. They're panicking, I told her. Rent's late. They'll come around. Or they'll double down, she said, and I hated how right she might be. I didn't know it then, but that voicemail was just the start. They weren't done with me yet, and I wasn't done with them. I thought cutting off Mom and Dad would feel like freedom, like finally shaking off a pair of boots that never fit right. It didn't. Not at first. The days after the wedding blurred into a weird mix of relief and dread, like I'd started a fight I wasn't sure I could finish. Lila and I were still unpacking boxes in our apartment, her sewing machine in one corner, my welding gear in another, when the fallout hit. I'd stopped their cash flow cold, and they weren't going to let it slide quietly. Rent day had passed a week ago, and I hadn't sent the usual $800. No $200 for their extras either. I kept waiting for the blowback, and it started with that voicemail from Mom. How could you do this to us? She'd sobbed, like I was the one who'd walked out. I deleted it, told Lila they were just rattling the cage, but she gave me that look, half worry, half warning. They're not done, she said, and I brushed it off. I should have listened. The calls kept coming. Mom one day, Dad the next. I let them stack up in voicemail, each one sharper than the last. Dad's first message was pure venom. You ungrateful little punk, you think you can ditch us? Call me back now. I didn't. Then Mom tried again, all tears and guilt. We're your parents, Elliot. We raised you. Don't turn your back on us. It was a script I'd heard before. Every time I'd pushed back growing up, they'd pull the "we gave you everything" card. Except I'd been the one giving for years, and they couldn't see it. By the second week, the messages stopped being sad and started getting mean. Dad left one late at night. I heard it buzz while Lila and I were watching some dumb movie to unwind. You're a disgrace, he slurred, probably halfway through a bottle of whatever he'd scrounged up. Cutting us off over that girl. You'll regret this. I hit delete, my jaw tight. Lila didn't say anything, just slid her hand into mine. She knew me well enough to let me stew. Then the letters started. Handwritten, shoved in our mailbox like they couldn't afford the phone bill anymore. Which, fair, they probably couldn't. Mom's was 3 pages of sob story. How they couldn't pay rent, how the landlord was hounding them, how she'd had to skip her book club because she was too ashamed. Dad's was shorter, angrier. You owe us, Elliot. Fix this. I tossed them in the trash, but they stuck in my head. I'd spent so long keeping them afloat. Years of overtime shifts, skipping my own plans, and now they were acting like I'd robbed them. I held my ground, though. Told Lila, they want to play victims? Let them. They'll figure it out. She nodded, but I could tell she was bracing for worse. She was right again. 3 weeks in, my phone rang while I was at the shop, grinding down a weld. Unknown number. I picked up, thinking it was a client. Elliot. It was Mom, voice trembling. We're going to lose the house. The landlord's giving us till Friday. Please, just talk to us. I gripped the phone, the hum of the shop fading out. You made your choice, I said, keeping it steady. You didn't come to the wedding. You called Lila trash. Why should I help you now? Because we're family, she cried. You can't let us end up on the street. Beg Lila. I said, the words cold and final. You want my help? Apologize to her. Mean it. Till then, you get nothing. She hung up, and I stood there, the grinder still in my other hand, buzzing like my nerves. I'd thrown down the gauntlet, and I wasn't sure if they'd pick it up or burn it. Lila didn't say much when I told her that night, just hugged me and said, you did what you had to. But I could see it in her eyes. She knew this wasn't over. For a while, it went quiet again. I started to think they'd given up, too proud to bend. Lila and I kept building our life. Dinner dates on the cheap, fixing up the apartment, laughing over her latest sewing projects. I'd almost convinced myself we were past it. Then, a month after that call, I got a text from Dad. No rant, no guilt trip, just 6 words. We need to see you. No mention of Lila, no apology. I showed it to her, and she frowned. They're desperate, she said. Rent's probably due again. Probably. I agreed, but my gut said it was more than that. I didn't reply, figuring they'd show their hands soon enough. I was right, too right. 2 days later, I came home from work to find a note taped to our door. Mom's handwriting, Shaky but clear. We're out of options. Please, Elliot. No signature, no plea to Lila. Just that. I crumpled it, tossed it in the trash, and told Lila, they're still playing games. But as I said it, I felt the ground shift under me. They weren't begging. Not yet. But they were close. Too close. And I had no idea how far they'd go to pull me back in. I'd been waiting for Mom and Dad to crack, but I didn't expect it to happen on my doorstep. For months had passed since the wedding. For months since I'd shut off their lifeline. $800 for rent, $200 for their cushy extras, all gone. They'd thrown everything at me. Voicemails, letters, that cryptic note taped to our door. I'd held firm, telling them to beg Lila or get nothing. They hadn't, and I thought they'd rather drown in pride than bend. I was wrong. It was a Saturday, late afternoon. Lila and I were in the living room, her stitching a patch on my work jacket, me flipping through a parts catalog for the shop. The knock came hard, 3 sharp raps that made us both freeze. I knew it was them before I even stood up. No one else banged like they owned the place. I opened the door, and there they were, Mom clutching her purse like a shield, Dad looming behind her, his jaw tight. They looked rough. Mom's hair was flat, no salon curls, and Dad's shirt was wrinkled, like he'd slept in it. Elliot, Mom said, her voice wobbly but loud. We need to talk. I leaned against the frame, blocking the way in. You've got 5 minutes. Dad's eyes narrowed, but Mom pushed past him. We're getting evicted. Monday. The landlord's done waiting. You have to help us. I crossed my arms. I told you what it takes. You want my help. You apologize to Lila. That's the deal. They glanced past me, where Lila stood in the doorway to the living room, quiet but watching. Mom's face twisted, like she'd bitten something sour. Dad just stared, his hands flexing at his sides. I waited, the silence stretching tight. Then Mom stepped closer, her voice dropping to a hiss. We're your parents, she said. You don't get to dictate terms. We raised you, fed you, put you through school, and I've paid you back. I cut in, my voice steady but sharp. Rent every month since I was 22. Cash for your golf clubs, your brunches. I've kept you afloat for years. You don't get to play that card anymore. Dad snorted, stepping up. You think you're some big man now, huh? Married that girl and turned your back on us. We're family, Elliot, not her. That lit a fuse in me. I straightened, meeting his glare. Lila's my family. You made it clear where you stand when you skipped the wedding. Called her trash. You don't get to waltz in here and demand anything. Mom's eyes welled up, but I'd seen the trick before. We're desperate, she said, tears spilling. We've got nowhere to go. You can't let us end up on the street. Then say it, I snapped. Apologize to her. Right now. They froze. Dad's face went red, Mom's mouth opened and shut like a fish. Lila stepped forward then, her voice soft but firm. You don't have to, Elliot. I don't need it. No, I said, not looking away from them. They do. They've trashed you for months. If they want my help, they earn it. Mom's shoulders slumped, and for a second, I thought she'd walk away. Then she turned to Lila, her voice barely above a whisper. I'm sorry. For what we said. We didn't mean it. It was weak, hollow, like she'd rehearsed it in front of a mirror and still couldn't sell it. Dad grunted, shifting his weight. Yeah, sorry, he muttered, staring at the floor. I watched them, my gut twisting. They didn't mean a word. I could see it in the way Mom's lips pursed, the way Dad wouldn't meet Lila's eyes. But they'd said it, and that was something. Lila touched my arm, her fingers light. It's okay, she murmured. Just for me. No, it's not, I said, loud enough for them to hear. But it's a start. I'll pay your rent. That's it. No extras, no allowance. You figure out the rest. Mom's head snapped up, relief flashing across her face. Thank you, Elliot. Don't. I cut her off. This isn't forgiveness. It's a line. Cross it again, and we're done for good. Dad muttered something under his breath, but Mom elbowed him quiet. They shuffled back to their car, a beat-up sedan I hadn't seen before, probably borrowed, and drove off. I shut the door, leaning against it, the weight of it all pressing down. Lila hugged me from behind, her arms tight around my chest. They don't mean it, she said, her voice muffled against my shirt. You know that, right? Yeah, I admitted, turning to face her. But I'm proud of you, she added, her eyes steady. For standing up. I kissed her forehead, letting out a breath I'd been holding. Had to. For us. We went back to the couch, but I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't the end. They bent, sure, but it was desperation, not change. Rent was covered. 800 wired to their landlord the next day, but they'd be back. I knew it. They'd always find a way to claw at me, and I'd have to decide how much more I could take. After Mom and Dad's half-baked apology on my doorstep, I thought I'd feel some kind of closure. I didn't. Wiring their landlord $800 to keep them off the street was a choice I made for me, not them. Proof I could set a boundary and stick to it. But as the weeks turned into months, I realized something. They weren't going to change. They'd bent just enough to get what they needed, and I'd given just enough to sleep at night. That was our new normal, and it was as shaky as a bad welt. Lila and I kept moving forward, building our life one day at a time. She'd started taking on sewing jobs, patching up jeans for neighbors, even making a dress for her cousin's kid. I was pulling extra shifts at the shop, saving up to fix the sink that still dripped no matter how many times I tightened it. We'd sit on our lumpy couch at night, her sketching patterns, me scrolling through parts listings, and it felt good. Real. Nothing like the polished life Mom and Dad had chased with my money. They didn't call much after that showdown. I checked my phone sometimes, half expecting another guilt trip, but it stayed quiet. Rent went out every month. 800, no more, no less. And I didn't hear a peep until about 6 months later. I was in the kitchen, frying eggs for dinner, when Lila handed me a letter. No return address, just my name in Mom's shaky scrawl. I opened it, bracing myself. It was short. Elliot, we're managing. Took jobs. Me at the grocery, your dad driving deliveries. It's not easy, but we're not asking. Just thought you should know. No apology, no plea, just facts. I read it twice, then slid it across the table to Lila. She skimmed it, her brow furrowing. Think they mean it? She asked. Nah, I said, flipping an egg. They're just out of moves. No cash to beg for, so they're playing tough. She nodded, but I could tell she wasn't so sure. I wasn't either, not really. Jobs. Mom bagging groceries. Dad hauling packages? I couldn't picture it. Her with her book club brags, him with his golf buddies. But the rent was all they got from me now, and I guess it finally sank in. No extras, no cushion. They'd have to scrape by like the rest of us. I didn't write back. Didn't call. What was there to say? They'd made their bed when they skipped the wedding, trashed Lila, acted like I owed them my whole life. I'd spent years propping them up, 800 here, 200 there. Every paycheck stretched thin so they could play rich. Cutting that off was the hardest thing I'd ever done, but it was the right thing. For me. For us. A year after the wedding, Lila and I hit a groove. We'd saved enough to replace that damn sink, and I installed it myself, her handing me tools and laughing when I cursed the rusty pipes. That night, we cooked dinner, nothing fancy, just pasta and sauce from a jar, and sat at our little table, the one her dad had built us as a wedding gift. She twirled her fork, grinning at me across the steam. Happy? She asked, like she already knew the answer. Yeah, I said, and I meant it. You. Always, she shot back, and we clinked our glasses, water, not wine, because we were still broke in the best way. Across town, I knew Mom and Dad were living a different story. I'd heard through a guy at work that Dad's delivery gig was real. He'd seen him hauling boxes in a beat-up van. Mom was at the grocery, too, ringing up cans and forcing smiles. They weren't starving, but they weren't thriving either. No more golf trips, no more brunches. Just bills and bickering, probably, over every dime they didn't have. I didn't feel sorry for them, not after everything, but I didn't hate them either. They were just there, a piece of my past I couldn't erase but didn't have to carry anymore. Sitting there with Lila, I thought about what family really meant. Growing up, I bought their line, that it was about blood, duty, what you owed. But they'd turned that into a leash, tugging me every time they needed something. Lila showed me different. Family wasn't who you were born to, it was who you chose to fight for. She'd fought for me, quiet and steady, through all their crap. And I'd fought for her, too, cutting that cord one hard choice at a time. I didn't know if Mom and Dad would ever get it. Maybe they'd keep grumbling about me, the son who abandoned them. Maybe they'd figure out how to stand on their own. Didn't matter. I'd given them a lifeline, rent, nothing more, and that was where it ended. Lila and I had our own life now, one we'd built from scratch, and it was stronger than anything they'd ever handed me. As we finished dinner, I looked at her across the table, her hair falling over one eye, and I knew I'd made the right call. They could keep their pride. I had something better. And that's the end of Elliot's story, Parents Cut Off, New Life Locked In. What would you have done? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'm reading every one. Smash that like button if you felt this, subscribe for more Real Talk stories, and hit the bell so you don't miss the next drop. Let's keep this convo going. See you in the next story.